I'm Machine Pun Kelly and I dismantle Republican talking points. I really do think this world would be better if MAGA just smoked a few joints. Hi there, I'm Machine Pun Kelly, aka MPK, and today I want to talk to you about this so called left wing assassination culture, whether or not that really is a thing. James Comey recently posted an image on Instagram showing seashells arranged to display the numbers 8647, and the right has lost its collective feces over it, suggesting that Comey was trying to get Trump assassinated. They want you to believe 86 is code for murder, which is only true if you learned everything you know about the term from watching Fox News starting on January 20th, 2025, and totally ignore the host of 8646 merch the people who are now yelling about it are probably wearing while they yell. But I'm not going to go into all that because there are bigger fish to fry, so long as fried fish hasn't been 86 from the menu. The bigger issue they're railing about is this study, and I use the term loosely, that shows 55% of self identified leftists think it is all or somewhat justified to murder Donald Trump. I'll let Megan, Santa Claus is white, Kelly, tell you about that study.
The Federalist producing a survey. It was done by the Network of Contagion Research Institute, NCRI, in partnership with Rutgers University, that finds 55% of self-identified leftists say killing Trump is justifiable. There is a broader assassination culture that appears to be emerging within segments of the U.S. public on the extreme left. Quote, "These attitudes are not fringe. They reflect an emergent assassination culture grounded in far-left authoritarianism and increasingly normalized in digital discourse." The reports found widespread justification for lethal violence, including assassination, among younger, highly online, and ideologically left-aligned users. The report points to disturbingly high levels of support for political violence, particularly against Trump and Elon Musk.
In the wake of the Comey news, Tully Gabbard weighed in, addressing the study, but this time leaving out the qualifier.
There has to be accountability for this. There was a Rutgers study that just came out a little over a month ago, Jesse, that asked respondents their view on these calls to assassinate President Trump. And over 55% of respondents felt that murdering President Trump would be, quote unquote, somewhat justified.
When I saw this, I was incredulous. Anytime I see a poll that calls out a subset of people and cites a majority of that subset, I have questions. What does 55% of leftists mean? And what does at least somewhat justified mean? What is the context of this study? So I decided to look at it and see. It was a bit difficult to find, but I left a link in the description if you want to see it for yourself. This is what I found. The first thing I noticed is that the actual results of the study were being misrepresented. To listen to Megan or Tulsi talk about it, it would seem like there are maybe 3 possible answers. Not justified, somewhat justified, and completely justified. But nope, there are 7 different options, not 2 or 3. Which begs the question, why are you allowing for nuance of 7 options if you're going to reduce it to a binary choice? The same poll could be represented to show that only 13% of self-identified leftists feel it is justified to assassinate Trump. While that may seem high, I could offer another poll in an equally biased way that shows that nearly half of all Trump supporters agree that abolishing slavery was wrong. And that's not the only way the poll reflects this particular type of fallacy, in that it lumps left of center and leftist into one group. In fact, there was no left of center option to choose from. So not one person who self-identified as left of center actually identified as left of center. The choices were far right, liberal, slightly liberal, middle of the road, slightly conservative, conservative, far right, no affiliation, and something. And so they shoehorned slightly liberal with liberal and then added that to far left and didn't even tell you how each group actually responded or how many were in each group. What's the point of having nuanced views if they're going to be lumped together anyway? Most leftists would not consider themselves liberals, and most liberals don't consider themselves leftists. And neither one would just say they're left of center as an identity. And I'd like to add that most people on the left don't even have any agreement on what those words mean, even if every Republican thinks that we're a bunch of radical left-wing socialist, communist Nazis, or whatever nonsense they like to ramble on about. Lumping everyone together can actually distort the findings. And let me explain how that is. Say you have 100 people who identify as one of the three. To keep the math simple, let's say there are 50 who are either liberal or slightly liberal, and another 50 who are leftist. Of the 50 who identified as leftists, all of them provided answers of 2 or higher. Of the 50 who identify as liberals, all but 5 of them answered 1, and the other 5 answered 2. So to say that 55% who identified as leftist or left of center might be mathematically correct, it is intellectually dishonest. So I looked for the whole numbers and found this. Using prime panels, we collected 2,651 respondents. Based on attention checks and those who took the survey in unreasonable amounts of times, we cleaned the data sheet down to a final database of 1,264 responses. It went from 2,561 responses to 1,264. So like half of the people they didn't even count. And the phrase, those who took the survey in unreasonable amounts of time, really caught my attention, as that indicates to me that this was an online survey, which by itself has its own bias. The other thing that struck me is this whole thing was not a response to Comey's Insta post, or even the alleged assassination attempts of Trump, but to Luigi Mangioni's assassination of Brian Thompson and the vandalizing of Tesla dealers. So that means in the peak of all that feeding frenzy, they solicited people to fill out an online survey. So a self-selected group of people chose to do that. And over half of them either got bored with it or saw through it. This tells me that the people who took and finished the survey in a, quote, reasonable amount of time were probably more inclined to have a strong view on the topic, either for or against. For example, if you made a poll about whether the Chicago Bulls should fire their head coach and sent it out to NBA fans, most of the responders would be the Bulls fans, and even those would be more likely to be polarized in their positions. This poll has that same kind of vibe. The more likely you are to have strong feelings on the subject, the more likely you are to take and finish the poll. So we're not just looking at skewed representation of the results, we're also looking at a biased representation of the population. The next issue I had with this is there was some clear signs of push polling. It's not just potential nuance removed from the responses or the responders, but even in the question. This feels like a push poll for a couple of reasons. The first being the questions that were asked. I looked for questions about figures other than Donald Trump or Elon Musk and couldn't find any. Only asking about those two further biases the polls. What if they asked about other figures? Was it justified for the U.S. to take out Osama bin Laden? Some could argue he's a political leader. People might argue back that bin Laden was responsible for the deaths of thousands of Americans. But others might respond that Trump was responsible for over 100,000 deaths in his first administration and could kill millions more worldwide through his policy choices in this second one. And that leads me to the next issue on push polling, which is what order were the questions asked in? We don't know the answer because they don't tell us. But that makes the entire thing suspect. The order of questions might change your answer. If I asked you, is it ever justified to kill a birthed and a healthy baby? You'd probably answer no. But if I asked you the famous baby Hitler hypothetical, if you could go back in time to kill baby Hitler and prevent World War II, would you do it? More people would answer yes. And the order you're asked them in might matter. If you just said you would never kill a baby, you might answer no to the Hitler question, where you might have answered yes to that one if you had been asked it first. Whether you agree with them or not is moot. Those are the justifications that might be in the minds of people giving a response other than one. And it might very well be that it moves their answer from 1 to 2 and not just 1 to 7. The other thing that they argue is Blue Sky is some sort of extremist farm for assassination culture. Not making up that term. They did. It's that crazy. I think it's preposterously dumb. Essentially, what they're suggesting is that since there was more sympathy for Luigi on Blue Sky, that makes Blue Sky some sort of assassination culture. Again, they use those words. Believe it or not, it's hysterical. But correlation is not causation. And they even only call it correlation in the report. But that's even a stretch. Blue Sky has a left-leaning culture, sure, but it doesn't have an assassination culture. People are coming to Blue Sky because they lean left, not leaning left because they came to Blue Sky. Sometimes correlation is just that. Correlation. So to recap, this poll cherry-picked its respondents, asked them leading questions, sorted out those who bailed because they didn't think it was honest, then took the nuance out of what the responders intended, said they were self-identified as something that they did, and then misrepresented the results. Now right-wing media is completely misrepresenting those skewed findings, entirely out of context to make it sound like half of all people who didn't vote for Trump want to assassinate him and are only a James Comey Instapost away from doing so. Once again, I'm Machine Pun Kelly, aka MPK. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to click like and subscribe.